on Monday. We've been taking a tour around the NFL the last couple of weeks on the Cattles and Ramie show, and time to make our last stop in the AFC South and talk some Colts with the radio voice of those Indianapolis Colts. Pleasure to welcome in Matt Taylor. Matt, how are you this afternoon, man?
Hey, I'm good. What's going on?
I got football fever, man. Like my two producers last week, when the Hall of Fame game was played, and man, it's the Hall of Fame game, Matt. I was glued to my TV. I was like, it was appointment viewing. I was like, I got to be on the couch with a box of Cheez-Its at 5 p.m. Pacific time to watch some bad football. Are you in the same place as I am, Matt?
I mean, I think so. I think, when players, Colts players showed up for camp on report day, everybody's geeked up because it's been 8 months and the storylines have been the same really since free agency and the draft. And so you're just ready for things to kind of progress. But I tell you what, it's been 2.5 weeks of Colts training camp. I feel like we've been at this 6 months because, and I mean that in a good way because, as it pertains to the Colts, I'm sure we're going to get into this. Mm-hmm. It's just been drama surrounding this team with quarterback and, COVID situations and, ankle injuries, and then, fractured foot last year in the second practice of training camp with Carson Wentz. So really, it's been really refreshing for the Colts because it's been normal. It's been all about football, and knock on wood, they haven't really sustained many injuries to this point in camp. So like I said, I feel like we've been time on task for about 6 months, and I'm ready for preseason game 1 coming up on Saturday in Buffalo.
That does kind of get me to my first Colts related question I wanted to ask you, Matt, which is how different are things with Matt Ryan instead of Carson Wentz at quarterback? And it sounds like you're saying the difference is calm and normality at the quarterback position.
Well, I mean, the biggest difference is we've had a normal offseason. Even 2021, you had the backdrop of COVID and a compromised spring and offseason workout program. This year, the guys had 9 weeks in the spring, culminating with mandatory minicamp in June, and Matt Ryan was here for all of that. It's the first time the Colts had a healthy starting quarterback go through a normal offseason workout program since 2018 with Andrew Luck. I mean, obviously, the franchise has been through a lot in terms of guys retiring and injuries at that position, so it was very healthy and refreshing again as far as that goes. And now here he is. Healthy and available at the start of training camp. And so he exhibits a good vibe. And I think he's a different guy on the field compared to off the field. And I mean that in a good way because he's one of those guys that can bond with his teammates, and it doesn't matter where you're from. I mean, guys in an NFL locker room, they come from all over the country, different, socioeconomic backgrounds. Matt Ryan can find a common thread and talk to guys and relate to guys no matter where they come from or what their backgrounds are. But then on the field, he can get after guys when they need to. And I think he's doing a nice job of balancing, hey, I've been in the league. I'm going into my 15th year. I played in a Super Bowl. I've won an MVP, multiple NFC championship games, all of that stuff. But he's also the new guy, and he's leading by example, and guys are gravitating towards him. And again, he was traded in March, so he's accomplished all of this in short order, and I think it's a nice balance. And he sort of has this Phillip Rivers, Peyton Manning, Andrew Luck aura about him, where he commands respect, but at the same time, he's just one of the guys. And I'm optimistic, very optimistic, what he can still provide to this team at age 37 going into the season.
And I was just going to say, and obviously the mental side of things, the leadership side of things, he's been in this league long enough and has a track record long enough. I don't think many people would be surprised by what you're saying, Matt, but I do think that people might have questions at 37 if, that the arm isn't quite what it was, or just the overall physical athleticism of a Matt Ryan isn't what. How does he look in practice, throwing the football and running this offense for the Colts?
Well, he looks incredibly sharp. And again, the biggest thing is just the mental, and that's on display, where he knows where to go with the football. He's so decisive. The accuracy, the ball placement, that's elite. I mean, he is, I think, 10th all time in NFL lore and accuracy is 65% for his career. And that's what you're going to get. I mean, if you get a stereotypical Matt Ryan season, which is a very good season by any quarterback measurement.
Sure. And
by that, I mean, if he throws for 4,100 yards and completes 66, 67% of his passes, throws 25 to 30 touchdowns, there's no reason why the Colts shouldn't win 10, 11 games, win the AFC South for the first time since 2014 and host a playoff game for the first time in that time span as well. I mean, you've got Jonathan Taylor, the leading rusher in the NFL, an above average offensive line. And I also think the potential of a top 10 defense because, you've got great playmakers coming back from last year when it was guided by Matt Eberflus. Now you've got a different scheme, a different defensive coordinator in Gus Bradley, but also it's like infusing that defense with like 3 first-round draft picks in terms of talent. Julian Blackmon is back. He's healthy. He tore his Achilles last year in week 5. He's one of the best, I think, young up-and-coming safeties in the league. You've got Yannick Ngakoue at defensive end, Stephon Gilmore at the cornerback position. So I think you've got elite players, or I should say premium players at premium positions on defense now for this team to go along with players that were here already, like Shaquille Leonard at linebacker, DeForest Buckner at defensive tackle. So you've got all of those things around Matt Ryan where he doesn't have to shoulder an enormous responsibility. He just needs to go out there and play, be accurate, get the ball out in 2.5 seconds, let the playmakers make plays. And I think that should bode well for this Colts team if he just comes in here and does his job, which he's done for 15 years.
And obviously standing behind him on most snaps will be Jonathan Taylor, which is a pretty good guy to get the football to, whether you're handing it to him or passing it to him. Is he still the focal point of this offense and what's going to make that thing go for the Colts?
He is, but, I've argued all off season, and it sounds negative, but I don't think that it is. I mean, Jonathan Taylor, led the universe last year in rushing and set all kinds of franchise records, but the Colts missed the playoffs. He rushed for 1,800 yards and had 21 rushing touchdowns and, accomplished all of these things, but the Colts were 9-8, missed the playoffs. He became the first rushing champ in the NFL to not make the playoffs since 2011 when Maurice Jones-Drew did that with the Jacksonville Jaguars. So I actually have been saying all off season that if Jonathan Taylor has a down season in terms of just overall statistics, if he rushes for 1,200 yards or 1,300 yards, not 1,800 yards and flirts with 2,000, that actually might be a better thing for the Colts because they need more balance. They need more efficiency in their passing game. They just couldn't get it last year. And it was kind of a head scratcher because they had Jonathan Taylor, they had the great offensive line, but they couldn't capitalize on that with play action and throwing the ball outside the numbers, making teams unstack the box. It just didn't happen. I mean, the Colts last year in the last 8 games of the season only threw for over 200 yards twice. So I think if Matt Ryan's more in the 4,000 yards passing and Jonathan Taylor's more in the 1,200 yards rushing, that could be a better thing for the Colts in terms of balance, and, dictating things to the defense, not being so predictable, and being able to close out some of the games late that they lost last year in the fourth quarter.
What's the one big question that you have about this football team? That if there's something that's going to stop them from reaching their full potential, what would you say that thing might be, Matt?
Oh, it's a good question. I mean, it all kind of starts and stops with the quarterback. And so, I mean, Matt Ryan with a new team, as we said, for the first time in 15 years, he's under contract for the next 2 years. The Colts are being very patient and very diligent about what they're doing in the long term with the franchise quarterback. Is that going to be a guy in the draft? Is it going to be a trade like we saw in the off seasons of the past with Russell Wilson, so on and so forth? But in the meantime, they still have this window of opportunity right here. They've got a really good roster. It's a well-built team. It's a good drafting team. So it's ready to go right now. The core of this team it's in its prime, and they're ready to win. And so can Matt Ryan kind of guide those guys and be that missing piece, to orchestrate a winning season and a significant season when everything else around him is ready to go? Can he do his part at age 37? Again, I think that he can. He's going to be accurate. He's going to get a lot of people involved in this offense. So it's going to be exciting to see what he still has left and the potential of this team now with him at quarterback.
That's the voice of the Colts and our guest for the last few minutes here on Cattles and Ramie, Matt Taylor. Matt, really appreciate the time and the insight, my man. Thanks so much.
Hey, you got it. My pleasure.
Here's Matt Taylor joining us on the show. That concludes the AFC South in our tour around the NFL. I don't know what division we jump to next, but it'll continue tomorrow here on the Cattles and Ramie show. Right after this,